Well, hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. I want to start off today by thanking everyone who watched the first episode of the YouTube and the podcast. I got a lot of really positive feedback, so I was very happy about that. Some great critiques for things I'm going to try and do different in the future. Some stuff about how to structure it, just some suggestions on production issues. All great stuff. I appreciate all of it. Everyone who watched it, thank you very much. That being said, this is week 2. We are just going to dive right in because we have a topic that's going to require quite a bit of discussion. As I was saying last week, let me apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a throat thing going on, a little bit of a cough, so if I clear my throat, I apologize. It's not the most pleasant sound, but I'm going to try not to do it. As I was saying last week, this is totally unscripted. I don't have anything written down that I'm going to say. I did make a couple notes. Just some things I wanted to talk about on the podcast this week because the topic is a big one. We're going to talk about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib being denied access to Israel. Now, this is a big topic in the broader sense. This particular thing is not that important, but the overall topic of Israel and Palestine is the big one that we're going to get into. But first, let's just talk about why Israel did what it did. I will say this flatly, that I think Ilhan Omar, in particular, is the worst member in Congress. The worst person that we have elected in the entire Congress. She is, I will say this unequivocally, she is an anti-Semite. She has too often strayed into anti-Semitic tropes for it to be by accident. I do not believe that, just to say this, it's not because she's Muslim that we are having this conversation. It's because she's an anti-Semite. That they are not the same thing. Many Muslims, wonderful people. Ilhan Omar, not among them. She has too often just gone... Her rhetoric, what she uses as a defense, is that she'll say something that can be taken two ways. And then she'll say, well, you're only taking it that way because I'm a Somali woman, because I'm Muslim. You're believing it's anti-Semitic when really I'm trying to open a dialogue. I just want to have a dialogue that no one else wants to have. Everyone just wants to support Israel 100%, and I'm trying to get us to have a conversation. And it's a good cover that a lot of people buy. A lot of people believe this. She has a lot of support, among Democrats in Congress especially. But it's just a cover, because what happens is she says something, then everyone says, hey, that's anti-Semitic, and then she says, no, it's not. You're taking it the wrong way. I just want to have a conversation. And it's fine to want to have a conversation. Israel is not above scrutiny. Israel is not above critique or condemnation when they act poorly. However, you probably shouldn't bring up things that are anti-Semitic in nature to have that conversation. If you have a problem with an Israeli policy, I would love to hear it, because I, too, have problems with Israeli policy in a lot of ways. But what you don't do is some of the things that she does. So, for example, I pulled up a couple of her tweets, her big ones, that just happened 1, 2, 3 right after 1, 2, 3, and everyone was like, okay, the first one came out, you say, all right, well, maybe she didn't know. She doesn't know that is crossing a line into unacceptable dialogue. And then, she doesn't really apologize. She just says, oh, sorry you feel that way, which is one of those fake apologies that people do. Then another one comes out and you say, okay, well, that's pretty anti-Semitic. Again, no apology. And then the third one comes out, you say, all right, well, now it's a pattern. Now it's a pattern that is unfortunate, because we have a member of Congress who now is saying openly anti-Semitic things. And this is kind of what happened with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party in the UK, where now you have something like 40% of Jews say that if the Labour Party was elected and took over the government in the UK, that they would leave the country, because the anti-Semitism has gotten so embedded in that party. And I fear that that's happening on the Democratic side, and it's unfortunate. But anyway, so here are some of the things that Ilhan Omar has said, which lead me and many others to believe that she is actually an anti-Semite. So this one was years ago. Excuse me, one sec. Clear my throat. Gross. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. That was 2012. So that's before she's in Congress. You say, all right, well, that's a long time ago. Not a big deal. She said that support for Israel was all about the Benjamins, and she accused Jews of dual loyalty to Israel. Now, all about the Benjamins, obviously, I don't have to explain to anyone. When you're talking about Jews and money, it's a little dicey. You shouldn't do it. It's one of those old adages that the only reason that people support Jews is because they are paying them. They're investing money all over the world. They control the banks, all these different things that are not good to say. And so when you talk about support for Israel is all about the Benjamins, that's the direct quote. It's not a good one. And the other one about dual loyalty is another big one that has kind of plagued Jews for a long time, is that they're never really loyal to the country that they're in, that all they're trying to do is influence people around them, buy influence in politics, gain power, because they have dual loyalty to Israel, and their main goal is to expand a Jewish state. That also not a good thing to say. So now, and she was so bad that the House introduced a resolution to condemn anti-Semitism in the wake of one of her tweets, because they said, hey, we have an anti-Semitic member of Congress who is saying all these terrible things about Jews, and we're going to condemn it. The unfortunate, this is really unfortunate. The unfortunate bit is that they really walked that resolution back because people felt like it was targeting her, which it was supposed to, right? It was against anti-Semitism, which she was being anti-Semitic. And so what happened was they expanded it out to basically just include every kind of hate that you could imagine. It condemned Islamophobia as well. It condemned anti-LGBTQ bigotry, racism, sexism. I think it condemned hatred against, giraffes for long necks. I don't recall exactly what else was in it, but it basically condemned any kind of hate you could have. I hate bad weather. I think that was also in there as well. The rain. It was against the rain. And people pointed out, rightly so, hey, this is a ridiculous resolution, because the whole point of the resolution was to condemn anti-Semitism because we have a member of Congress who's being anti-Semitic. And so a lot of Republicans didn't vote for it. I'm not 100% on this, apologize in advance, but I'm pretty sure a couple of Democrats also did not vote for it because they recognized what it was, which was a farce. It just wasn't a real resolution at that point. But anyway, it was so bad that Congress actually tried to pass a resolution against hate in the wake of Ilhan Omar. Now, my big problem with that whole scenario was that, does anyone remember Steve King? Does anyone remember what happened to Steve King and on the Republican side? When anyone on the Republican side has something racially tinged that they say, every single person in the Republican Party is then asked about it and asked to condemn it. And as they should be. I honestly don't see a problem with this, like asking people, do you condemn this ideology? They do it with Trump all the time. Donald Trump will say something stupid because he's not that bright. And then everyone will be like, well, do you support this terrible thing that Donald Trump says? And every Republican has to go, oh, God, I can't really not say that because Donald Trump is petty and, he might try and squish me. But it's not a bad thing to be able to do. If somebody says something racially tinged and they ask me about it, for example, you say, hey, Tyler, do you condemn this racially tinged thing? I say, yeah. I don't like that person who said that, and I don't like that ideology. It's easy to do. Most people can do it. So when Steve King, who is a member of Congress who has kind of walked an interesting line for a long time, a lot of people have said he's dog whistled for a long time along racial lines. People say he has said some terrible things. And I'm always of the opinion to give people the benefit of the doubt. Say, okay, I give them the benefit of the doubt. You say something that's dumb, chances are you're just dumb, and you're not necessarily a white nationalist. So you give them the benefit of the doubt, at least for a little while. Again, Ilhan Omar, she says one stupid thing. You say, that's just a stupid thing to say. It's kind of anti-Semitic. Maybe don't do that. But when you just continually do it, 1, 2, 3, and you don't apologize for it, and you clearly don't care very much to apologize, you just want to pretend as though you're the victim, again, then we say, all right, well, now I'm not on your side. So Steve King, a while back, said something incredibly stupid about when did words like white nationalism become bad, or it was a tweet, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something along those lines. When did white nationalism become something we should be ashamed of? Obviously, a stupid, bigoted thing to say. Just terrible. White nationalism is something we have always hated and should always condemn because it's a garbage ideology. And so this happened. He said it, and what happened? The House censored him, and then he was stripped of all his committee assignments. And as he rightly should be. If you say racist, bigoted things, I don't think you should be in Congress. If they want to elect you to Congress, if your district wants to elect you, okay, fine. All right, that's the will of the people. But if you say that stuff, that doesn't mean Congress has to grant you power within its body. I thought it was good that they stripped him of committee assignments. I thought it was good that they passed a resolution against him. But that's how the Republicans handled it. That's what they did. They said, hey, look, and this is important. This is very important. If there is a person who proclaims to be on your side, right? If you're a Republican, they say they're a Republican. If they're a Democrat, they say they're a Democrat. If that person is out there, then it is incredibly important that when they say things that you don't agree with, when they say things that are absolutely wrong, that you condemn them in the harshest terms possible. So when Ilhan Omar says something that's anti-Semitic, and you don't do that, then you allow everyone on the other side to point to you and say, look, they condone anti-Semitism. This is how it spreads. This is how terrible ideologies spread, is because you look at someone and say, well, she might have support among regular people who haven't done a lot of digging. She's on the cover of magazines. And so if you're Nancy Pelosi, you say, I have to use this to my benefit. And you don't want to fight a war against these people who are famous. I'm talking specifically about the squad at this point, the terrible, terrible squad. And so anyway, so that's Ilhan Omar. She is not great. She's so bad, in fact, that the House almost passed a resolution against her specifically, just targeting anti-Semitism coming from people in Congress, which would be her. So she's not great. So anyway, so that's her as a person. She's an anti-Semite. She is anti-Israel. I don't believe that she, if pushed on the question, she just does not support Israel. And she just says terrible things. I don't know how anyone can look past it at this point. Rashida Tlaib, the other one who's involved in this controversy, she's not quite as bad, though she's still not great. My big problem with her is not so much that she says anti-Semitic stuff as it is that she definitely hangs out with a lot of anti-Semites. So in her, for example, her swearing-in process, she's been photographed with a bunch of people at meetings and at her swearing-in ceremony, where it's like you look into the people and they either support organizations that support terrorism, or they themselves just openly support terrorism. And you say, yeah, that's not good. That's not a good look for members of Congress to be associating with people who have sort of hateful ideologies towards Israel and think terrorism is an okay way to act. So anyway, that's my big problem with her, is basically it's that game of like, who do you associate with? And when you look into the people that she has been known to associate with, you see a lot of really rabid anti-Semites and a lot of terrorist supporters, which is, again, not a good thing. I think we should all be able to agree that terrorism is bad. So anyway, those are the two. Excuse me. And so they got denied access to Israel. They were going there on a trip. Israel denied them access. Now, why did this happen? First of all, let's talk about why this happened first. So Israel has a law in place since 2017 that says anyone who supports BDS, boycott, divest, sanction, anyone who supports this movement isn't allowed to come into the country and propagandize. as someone who is a free speech purist, I don't necessarily support this. However, in the rare case, Israel being probably the most unique country on the planet, I understand their rationale, because there are not a lot of other countries. In fact, I don't know if I can, maybe the United States, but to a way lesser extent. But there's not another country on the planet that people want to destroy in the way that they want to destroy Israel. And I think that's fair to say. I can't think of one. I would love it if someone pointed out another one. But there's not another country on the planet that has as much hate directed towards it as Israel. So they're in a unique position in the world, because there are literally millions and millions of people who want to see that country destroyed, just abolished, to be obliterated, never to have existed in the first place. So I understand the rationale. You say if you support a movement that is anti-Semitic in nature, which BDS is, then you can't come in our country and propagandize what amounts to hate. Okay, so that's where we're sitting. That's the beginning of it. Well, then Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib both support BDS. They have called for it openly. They want boycotts, they want divestment, and they want sanctions against Israel. Now, this movement, just on a side note, is anti-Semitic, 100%. If you support BDS and you don't realize this, let me educate you a little bit. BDS is a movement that was founded by anti-Zionist, anti-Israel groups, very anti-Semitic in nature. Now, these movements were designed for the economic strangulation of a country, to allow it to starve and never to have existed, in the hopes that the world would be able then to crush it. Now, this movement has a very specific goal in mind. It's not for the humanitarian crisis of the Palestinians. It is to destroy Israel. Those two often get conflated. They'll say BDS is about human, and this is, I think, what the good people who support BDS say. The people who don't know the real motive. They say it's because of the treatment of the Palestinians, and we need to have better treatment. And so if we boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, then we can get these people out of poverty and out of the terrible conditions that they live. And the people who know better say, yeah, BDS is going to put an economic chokehold on Israel. It's going to weaken them, and then we'll be able to destroy that country. And this is not something that is just a theory. The groups that founded BDS are incredibly anti-Semitic in nature. They do not like Jews. So it's not a good thing. It's not a good ideology. And and this isn't just me saying this, as someone who is sort of a libertarian in nature, kind of middle of the road person. The person who also said this, and this is a direct quote, again, I wrote this down: "We must be vigilant against bigoted and dangerous ideologies masquerading as policy, and that includes BDS. Vigilant against bigoted and dangerous ideologies." Now, this was in July of this year, not that many months ago. That was Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi says BDS is bigoted and dangerous. Now, I 100% agree with Nancy Pelosi on this issue. 100%. She said it was bigoted. She said it was dangerous. 2 members of Congress right now are openly calling for it. Again, a bigoted and dangerous ideology that masquerades as policy. Now, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are openly calling for BDS. They wanted to go to Israel. Israel has a law that says if you support this anti-Semitic movement, you can't come in the country. They were denied. This seems as though it's a stunt designed to make Israel look bad. They didn't want to go there to check out the humanitarian crisis. That really, I don't believe, is their thing. And we know this because they had an opportunity to go with Congress on a congressional trip, and they declined. What they did instead was they organized their own trip. They said, we're going to get our own trip to go. And this is also, this just is, it shows you their cards right here. They organized their own trip. It was organized by a group called MIFTA, I believe is how it's pronounced. Excuse me if I don't know. And now they're sponsoring the trip. MIFTA is sponsoring the trip for these two. MIFTA is an openly anti-Semitic organization. If you go on their website, for example, they have articles that talk about the blood libel, which is probably one of the most anti-Semitic Jewish stereotypes you could possibly promote. The blood libel, for those who don't know, it was said a long time ago and has actually resulted in the death of a lot of Jews throughout history. The blood libel says that Jews are stealing Christian children. It used to be Christian children. They're stealing Christian children, and they're taking them and they're using their blood to make matzah. I believe that it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to say. It's never been true, ever. And it's resulted in the death throughout history of a lot of Jews because people believe this. They took it seriously. Now, MIFTA propagates this on their website. It's not me saying that. This is on their website. They promote terrorism, and if you look on their website, they have links to articles that are from neo-Nazi organizations in the United States against Jews. This is an openly anti-Semitic organization organizing a trip to Israel for 2 members of Congress. And when they're denied, then they play the victims. They say, look, Israel wants to be above criticism. Israel's not above criticism. There are newspapers in Israel that are very critical of the government and the policies there. There are free speech laws in Israel that allow criticism of government. It's a democracy. It is the only democracy in the Middle East. So the idea that Israel wants to be above criticism is not true. What they don't want are people coming into the country who want to destroy the country. And again, they probably have the best case in the world for restricting what people can say in their country because they are unique in the way that people want to destroy them. They actually want the destruction of their country. So anyway, this is what happened. They are denied, and now everyone wants to criticize Israel. Should they have done it? Maybe not. I understand it in general, why Israel would want to do that, but you're playing into their hand by doing this. You're making them be able to say, look, Israel doesn't want to be criticized. They want to stand. They don't like us because we're Muslim, even though, for example, 1/5 of the population of Israel is Arab, while the surrounding countries, no percentage of them are Jewish. Do you know why this is? It's because Jews can't live in those countries. Arabs can live in Israel. The 1/5 of the population in in Israel is Arab. No Jews live in the surrounding areas. It's not true. I remember an article. Oh man, I don't want to mess it up. I think there was one Jewish person who lived in Afghanistan. I apologize for not remembering that exactly, but he was the last Jew in Afghanistan. This was maybe last year. I remember reading this. And I remember thinking, and nobody finds that interesting, the fact that Jews just can't live in the Middle East except in this one country. And we're all just supposed to pretend that they're moral equivalents. Anyway, and then the Rashida Tlaib just sort of openly showed that what was going on, why this was actually just a publicity stunt and not really trying to have a conversation or move a talk forward, because she's denied access. So she writes this appeal, this humanitarian appeal. It says, my 90-year-old grandma lives in the West Bank. I would love to see her because this might be my last opportunity before she dies. Again, this was calculated because if Israel denied her still, then she would say, look at these terrible people. They won't even let me see my grandma. How terrible. But then they didn't, because they said, all right, look, of course you can come see your grandma. Just don't propagandize when you're here. Come see your grandma, spend time with your family. You're not allowed to support or promote BDS while you're in this country, though. But just please come spend time with your grandma. So then Rashida Tlaib says, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. It would kill a piece of me to have to come there and be silenced. Again, no one is silencing you. You're a member of Congress. You can say whatever you want. Just don't promote propaganda within our borders. That's what they were saying. And it really just showed the case. She literally hates Israel more than she loves her grandma. That's what this comes down to. This is not standing on principle. This is you hate Israel more than you love your grandma at this point. And I believe it's the foreign minister of Israel said that in a tweet, and I thought it was brilliant. It really does show that this was never about having a conversation. This is a prop publicity stunt by these two. And anyway, so that's where we stand right now. Israel doesn't look great because you're giving these people fuel that they're going to use to just try and light a fire under people to hate you. So it's not good. But they're just terrible. Both of them. They're just terrible. And I wish people could see that, because it's just they're being so dishonest with their motives. And again, that was shown in the itinerary of their trip. The itinerary of their trip didn't even say they were visiting Israel. Now, they were going to spend time in a lot of cities in Israel. I believe they were going to spend a lot of time in Jerusalem. Didn't even mention they were visiting Israel. It said they were going to visit Palestine. Palestine's not a state. It's not a state. Israel's a state. Jerusalem is in Israel. But again, they don't even acknowledge that Israel exists in the itinerary on the trip that they're planning, that they're now complaining about. Anyway, the whole thing is stupid. People are terrible. I want to talk a little bit about why. Excuse me. I want to talk a little bit about why this entire thing. Why is it that I, for example, support Israel? Why don't I not look at the people who live in poverty in Palestine and acknowledge that they're the victims? And I will tell you exactly why. It is because when it comes to concessions, when it comes to negotiations, Israel is always the one who's willing to give things up to make peace, and the Palestinians never are. Never in history. Now, and this is great if you just do this little thought experiment for me. Imagine, close your eyes. Imagine that Israel was given a magic wand. All right? And they wave the magic wand and they get whatever they want. And they wave that magic wand. What do you think the world looks like? The world just leaves them alone. They just live in peace with all their neighbors. That's what they want. That is it. Now, if you give that same magic wand to, for example, the leaders of Hamas, who runs Gaza, or the Palestinian Authority, and they get to wave that magic wand, what does the world look like? The world is devoid of Jews, and Israel is destroyed. That is the difference. I support Israel because Israel is, again, the only democracy in the Middle East, and they just want to live in peace. They just want to be left alone, and it is not the same both ways. So the fact that people in Gaza live in poverty, it doesn't make me take their side because they're poor, right? Like that's not the fault of Israel at this point. And we're going to talk a little bit about why, just briefly. So people who don't know the history look at these two unequal forces, and they say Israel is more mighty, therefore they're the oppressor. And that is not the case, because it has never been the case. So after the state of Israel was established, you had Israel has been attacked numerous times. Well, they're attacked constantly, but they have been attacked in full-out conflict numerous times. Most notably, let's talk about 1967, the Six-Day War. So all the forces, all the countries, every country around Israel was mounting for an offensive against Israel. And Israel saw them. You saw people in Jordan and Lebanon and Egypt. You saw these forces mounting. And so what Israel did was they attacked all the troops that were mounting on their border to destroy their country. Again, this is all the Arab nations around their country teamed together to do it. And Israel surprised everyone and did a preemptive strike against all these forces mounted on their border and destroyed them. The Six-Day War was a massive, massive victory for Israel. They took the West Bank, they took Gaza, they just dominated in the war. And what happened was, after this, basically a movement sparked up that said they are no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. No one was interested in negotiating with Israel or recognizing its right to exist after this. Like it never, they attempted to have talks. They were going to relinquish territory. No one would come to the table. Again, no peace, no recognition, no negotiations was the motto of the Arab states that surrounded Israel at the time. So we fast forward, Bill Clinton negotiating in the 90s for peace. Israel was willing to grant a Palestinian state. They were going to give all of Gaza to the Palestinian state, 94% of the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Now this is a totally fair deal. They wanted an independent Palestinian state. They granted it, and they said no. Now, why did Yasser Arafat say no? I don't know the answer. Bill Clinton himself said something along the lines of, and this is a little paraphrase, he said something along the lines of, Yasser Arafat was here for 2 weeks and said no to everything that was offered. They don't want to negotiate. They don't want to negotiate. And again, all of Gaza, 94% of the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, they were going to split. Israel was going to split its capital, give it to the Palestinian state. Now, okay, that seems like a great deal, but they don't want Israel to exist. They don't take it. Now, in 2005, Israel unilaterally pulled out of Gaza. They just pulled out. They said, here you go, take it. So they're, right now, when you look at the conditions in Gaza, that is not Israel's fault. Israel does not have a presence in Gaza. The fact that Gaza is the way it is because for the past 14 years, they elected a terrorist group to run their country. They elected Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It is a terrible organization. And we don't have to, again, this is not me just saying that. I believe they're designated a terrorist organization. And Hamas, that runs Gaza, in their founding charter, they call for the obliteration of the state of Israel. They're not going to rest until it's destroyed. Now, and that they were elected. That government was elected in Gaza. This government that openly calls for the destruction of Israel. And so since 2005, when they pulled out, Gaza has remained in poverty, despite what amount to billions of dollars of aid given to that area. The billions of dollars that have been given, they don't go to humanitarian costs. They go to building rockets to fire into Israel. They go to building tunnels in which to dig into Israel and kidnap Israelis. They don't go to food. They don't go to medicine. They don't go to building schools. Hamas is a terrible organization elected by the people in Gaza. And we know that they're dictatorial in nature because I don't believe, have had another election since they were elected. So Gaza lives in absolute poverty. And this is also by design because Hamas realizes that when you can show people in Gaza suffering, when you show people in Gaza starving or living in filth, that this makes Israel look bad. And so they keep their people immiserated because it makes Israel look bad. That's the kind of people that run Gaza right now. But again, Israel right now has no presence in Gaza. None whatsoever. In Israel, again, in 2008. In 2008, they offered the same deal. They were going to create a Palestinian state. All of Gaza would be in the Palestinian state, 94% of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. All of this were going to be granted to, at this point, I believe they were negotiating with Hamas. I have to check on that. But at this point, I believe they were negotiating with Hamas. And Hamas rejected it. They said, no, we want all of it. Again, that's not a two-sided thing. 71% of Palestinians want a single-state solution. 71% of Palestinians want a single-state solution. Now, this is not Palestine being incorporated, granting them citizenships to become Israeli. They want a Palestinian state and no Israel. 71% of people in Palestine. So this is all, it's not equal on both sides. It really isn't. Israel's willing to give. Israel wants peace. Hamas does not want peace. The Palestinians do not want peace. They want a destruction of the Israeli state. And we know this because they want Palestine. how's the phrase go? Palestine to the sea, I believe. I can't remember exactly how it goes. But it's the chant that they want Palestine to extend all the way to the sea, which means in between Palestine and the sea is a state called Israel, and they want that state wiped off the face of the earth, and they want Palestine. That's it. And so it's not fair. It's not the same. And I just wish more people understood that throughout history, first of all, excuse me, sorry people. First of all, the idea that this land was taken from Palestinians is just not true. It's not true at all. There has been an unbroken Jewish presence in that area of the Middle East for 3,000 years. There has never not been Jews that live in that part of the world. Palestine itself was not a state. It never was. That was just a region, that the thing that people in that region were called. And Palestinians used to include a lot of Jews. That name used to include a lot of Jews. So this idea that there was a Palestine that just was taken away from someone, it never existed. Never, ever. And so I don't know what people are talking about when they say that this land was stolen. It wasn't stolen. Never was stolen. Because there never was a Palestinian state. Again, it's just a name for people who lived in that region of the world. Anyway, so that's basically the entire point of today, is that this entire controversy, quote-unquote controversy, is manufactured. Don't be outraged at Israel for doing what it did, because it probably has the most understandable reasons to do what they did. And these two members of Congress, again, one I'll openly say is anti-Semitic. Ilhan Omar, I don't have a doubt in my mind at this point that she is anti-Semitic in nature. I do not care for her. Rashida Tlaib, I think she says a lot of stupid things. I think she behaves in a way I don't enjoy. But I won't say she's anti-Semitic. I will say that she definitely hangs out with enough anti-Semites to make me nervous, to make me uncomfortable. If you saw pictures of me walking around with a lot of white nationalists, if I was buddied up with Richard Spencer and I'd say, well, I'm not a white nationalist, I just hang out with him, I'd be like, a lot of people would say, yeah, that's not okay. And I'm kind of that opinion. You know, the people you hang out with sometimes say a lot about you. Not always. I hang out with a lot of people who I don't necessarily agree with on everything. That's actually me and most people. I don't agree with a lot of people on a lot of things. But I hang out with some people, you know, that are not necessarily great. And I don't hold all their beliefs. So I don't hold anyone responsible for the beliefs of their friends. However, if all of your friends tend to hold those beliefs, then maybe I might start attributing them to you. Seems like a lot of Rashida Tlaib's friends have views that I find abhorrent. So I don't, again, I'm not going to openly say she's an anti-Semite, but she hangs out with enough that it's not great. Anyway, I hope people I know we did a brief overview of Israeli-Palestine conflict. There is a lot to digest there. There's a lot you could go over. Obviously, this is a long time conflict, so we're not gonna solve it in a 32 hour long podcast. But anyway, I hope that brief overview gave a little bit of rationale as to why I believe the things I do. We're gonna move on here real quick to a different thing I wanted to talk about. I got a couple really good questions, emails that I would like to talk about just briefly. The first one says, is it possible to be Christian and a Democrat? Now, this is an interesting question because for a long time, because the Republicans have tended to have a stranglehold on the evangelical vote, people have always associated Christianity with Republican Party. There are obviously every single person in Congress proclaims to be religious of some kind. Everyone says they're Christian, mostly. Now this is I don't know. This is just something. I one time saw this poll which asked people in the United States, which of these fill in the blank would you be willing to vote for? And it went through a list, and it was like, would you be willing to vote for a black man, a black woman, Asian man, gay man, all these different stuff down the list. And most people were willing to vote for most things, which I thought was awesome. The ones at the bottom, the two at the bottom, would you be willing to vote for a Muslim? I believe something like half of the country said yes. They'd be willing to vote for a Muslim for president, which is a little low. I think it should probably be a little higher. But the one at the very bottom, would you vote for an atheist for president? That's like 30% of the country said yeah, they would. It was at the very bottom of the list, behind white, black, gay, Asian, Muslim, anything else. Atheist at the very bottom of the list. And I've always thought that was interesting. But it is true. Everyone in Congress proclaims to be religious in nature. I don't believe that they necessarily are. And I think the Democratic Party has a problem because if you are devout, a lot of the things that they say go against the teachings of the church. So, for example, if you're a cafeteria Catholic, you pick and choose what you want. You can do whatever you want. But if you are a really, like the Pope's word, the Pope is the vicar of Christ, he is the word of God, then I think you'd have a hard time squaring that with the Democratic Party, with their views on abortion and birth control at this point specifically. It's hard to say you're a Catholic and be pro-choice. Because if you are I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying if you are trying to be true to the doctrine, if you're trying to be true to the teachings of the church, it's very hard to do. And I think you can believe whatever you want to believe and be whatever you want to be. You can be a Christian and be a Democrat, absolutely. But you're going to have to wrestle with those questions of faith that are important. You might not like abortion. You might think that abortion is wrong, but believe people should have a right to choose. I think that's a totally valid way to live your life. That is actually the libertarian nature of myself in general. There are a lot of things that people do that I do not choose to do, but I believe they should have the right to do. Now, obviously, that can extend to almost all areas of life. Abortion's always a tricky one to extend that to, because if you believe that life begins at conception, then it's about that life and not about the life of the person who's choosing to have the abortion. So that one's always tricky. But in every other area of life, it's really not that tricky. I think people should be able to do whatever they want to do as long as they're not interfering with anyone else's right to do what they want to do. Now, that is basically libertarianism in a nutshell. I can't remember where the phrase comes from, but it's something along the lines of, I believe in your right to wave your hand, provided you're not slapping me in the face. Right? You can wave your hand in whatever direction, however you want to do it, as long as you're not slapping anyone in the face. So that's sort of my view on everything. And I think you can be a Christian and a Democrat and have that view. Right? Just believe that other people should be able to do what they want, even though you don't necessarily support it. I think it's a little bit harder depending on what you believe and what your, religious teachings say. Again, if you are a devout Catholic, it would be really hard to be a Democrat because it's just the Pope says no. The Pope says no to abortion. Nope, it's immoral, it's wrong, it's murder. That's the Pope's view. He's the vicar of Christ, the head of your church. It'd be incredibly difficult to say, well, I know better than the Pope. No, you don't. You really don't. If you think that you do, you don't. Not when it comes to Catholicism. He's in charge. He got there because he devoted his life to it. And what he says goes. You don't get to just pick and choose. And that's why I've always had problems with cafeteria Catholics, just for that reason. Who are you to pick and choose what bits of the religion you choose to follow and what you don't? I don't know. I don't understand it personally, which, again, that might be part of the reason why. But that's just my personal opinion. Just do what you want. Just do other people, let them do what they want. Again, abortion's the big one that you'd have to wrestle with morally before you can really figure out if you can be a Democrat. But anyway, so that's my favorite question. I actually kind of touched on both of these in this answer because another one was, can people believe in the right to choose but hate abortion? And that goes in the same category that I was just talking about. Yes, absolutely. I think you can. Again, abortion is always a tricky one because if you believe that life begins at conception, then no. You don't believe in anyone's right to choose because you say, well, no, it's not your life I care about. It's the life of the unborn child. I don't hold that view, but I understand people who do. I understand absolutely the concern as to why that would be the case. But I don't want to get into a big talk about abortion right now. I've rambled long enough for this week. So anyway, I think we're going to just leave it off there today. I absolutely appreciate everyone who's going to watch. I'm sure there's going to be, excuse me. I am absolutely sure that there are going to be a lot of people who disagree with my take on this. I encourage everyone, please, 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 leave me comments or send me an email. Email is definitely the best way. I will 100% read all the emails I get. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, if they're nice, if they're funny, I will read them on the air for sure. Questions I absolutely love. The email address is tcchrestman@gmail.com. Please just email them on over there. Leave me comments down in the YouTube. Please remember to subscribe, comment, like the video. The Apple Podcast is going to be up after 3 episodes, so you'll be able to download this straight to your phone. You won't have to go on the YouTube to view it. I think that's where we're going to leave it this week. Appreciate everyone for taking the time to watch it. I know it's a long one. Apologies in advance, a big topic. But I appreciate every one of you. Why don't you guys tune in next week? Have something else fun to talk about. And thank you guys for tuning in. See you later.